That's Donald Trump here.
Hello.
Well, this is whatever her name is.
Maybe
Is
it's
this turned on?
No, not yet.
Doesn't sound like
it.
Hello. There we go. And welcome again
Louder, louder.
the University Community Forum. We are fortunate today to have as our speaker Professor Felix Moos, who is currently a professor emeritus in anthropology at the University of Kansas. He's had a wide list of residencies and accomplishments, having taught at the universities of Heidelberg, in Tokyo, in Nankai, China, in Kazakhstan, Thailand, at the Korea University and the University of Durham in England.
I'm from England.
He's also held the Ricketts Chair at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, and has taught at the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. As you can tell, he has a world view and has served in various U.S. government positions and in the U.S. Armed Forces. I'm sure we will enjoy his talk today on an anthropologist's view of our current world situation.
Well, thank you for coming at noon.
You'll have to talk up a little louder.
I have talked to this forum many times since I came to KU in 1961. And I remember very fondly that during the Vietnam conflict, when we had many demonstrations, we had exciting meetings in this building. I'm kind of nostalgic that we don't have it anymore, because at the time this room was filled with people who had different opinions. But I think we tried to be very civil, and I remember at the time I taught in Hoke Auditorium, 600-700 students, and the demonstrators came in to my class and chanted, "Ho, ho, ho." And of course they expected that the class would be suspended, and I always invited them in. I said, please, let's have a discussion about Vietnam. And when they found that I had actually been there and they hadn't been there, it was an uneven discussion, and the students took sides, and so I missed these exciting times where we could talk to each other with different ideas and different experiences. Anthropology at KU became a department in 1964-65. We have had a rocky history as a department. We had many ups and downs. Hopefully the future will be more peaceful. But in any extent, I'm still teaching some classes. Last semester, together with Professor Carney in business, I taught a class on Japan, doing business in China and Japan. And I continue to teach 1 or 2 classes a week. So I haven't given up. I'm quite old. I was born in 1928, so I'm well in my 80s, but just yesterday we, in the Endicott Society, we saw a film, Die Brücke, about my generation at war at the end of World War II in Germany. So I'm a survivor, and obviously my generation is dying very rapidly. but I'm happy to be here. So anyway, today I thought I'd give you an inkling what an anthropologist could do with 2017. Obviously, in the last few days, we had many excitements in the United States. My wife, who's, by the way, Chinese, and also a Ph.D. in anthropology, can witness that we just came back from Europe, and believe me, European newspapers, Swiss and German newspapers keep track of what is happening in the United States, and they are questioning very often the sanity of our population here in America. But anyway, she has given me very good advice. She has said, please, no politics. So today, I will talk about 3 aspects of anthropology. One, the first one is evolution. I don't know how many are aware that evolution and the discipline of anthropology obviously depends on at least a knowledge of what evolution entails. It has had a rocky history in our state. I'm a living example. I used to take my students to the Topeka Zoo, and one of the assignments was to let the students watch chimpanzees for several hours. And obviously, if you have ever watched chimpanzees for several hours, you know that they're doing things in a very lifelike manner, very similar to what human beings are doing. I was then cautioned that perhaps it was not very wise to take my students to the zoo and let them watch chimps. And I was told that because it was maybe not wise, maybe I shouldn't take my students to the zoo. So I quit taking them to the zoo. So I'm just telling you that even in Kansas, in our enlightened state, we had many discussions if we could accept evolution. I think in 2017, you have to be aware that evolution is with us at every moment of our lives. We are evolving. One thing that I would like to remind you that evolution is not just a physical process. All of us are evolving. We don't need an appendix anymore. Our teeth are changing. Evolution, obviously, today happens primarily in technology. In a moment, I will talk about population, but I don't have to remind you that in the future, technology may mean there are fewer jobs as they existed today and 50 years ago, rather than more jobs. In other words, evolution is not just a physical process. Evolution happens in technology, and therefore technology will mean that the way we operate as human beings anywhere will be very different from what we used to know. Therefore, some professions, and I hope university professors, will not evolve to leave the scene completely, but many of you who have taught at universities know that today, in some places, you can get a degree without ever seeing a live professor. So that is evolution. And therefore, the evolution in technology will proceed. So evolution is obviously a process that is backed up by probably the best evidence that we can have. What archaeologists and paleontologists have proven is that obviously human beings are descendants of an evolutionary process that is still continuing. So I remind you that evolution is a factor in our daily lives. Let me see if I can, obviously that's a very good example of what is happening. I don't have to tell you that if you go to any airport, all the people are constantly on their phone checking what messages have they received. They don't talk to each other anymore. And if any of you are still teaching classes, you know that has become a real problem, because when you ask students, when did Columbus, start out on his voyage, they say, just give me a minute, I Google it. So today, knowledge really is contained in a very different technology than before. But I want to remind you that one aspect in which evolution really is useful is that teachers can remind students today that thinking is evolving, that our thoughts really can be different from one year to the next. And therefore, I'm a strong believer that a university, rather than being a business in which we sell grades for so many hours to every student, we should be focusing on really educating our next generation to face the challenges in a somewhat more realistic way than what we are doing. I just want to mention that as an individual who has tried to learn some other languages than the ones I was brought up with, if you look at KU, our enrollment, even though we have about 30,000 students in Japanese and Chinese, are not completely wonderful. Not to say anything about German. The only language at KU that is doing well probably is Spanish. And Spanish is no longer a foreign language in the United States. If you go to Florida and California, in some places, if you don't know Spanish, you are in some kind of difficulty. So I remind KU that rather than having only now a school of languages, literatures, and cultures, we should teach translators how to translate different languages. We should encourage our students that it is true, English has become the language of the world. Americans expect naturally that everybody speaks English. And in Europe, that's certainly true. But there are parts of the world where English is not spoken. Chinese is coming up, and I believe Chinese is spoken by more people than English. So let's face it, a university has really an obligation to teach that language and culture is an equipment that every student today should master in some way. We are certainly not doing that. The computer and electronics obviously have changed our lives. Today, I think I know that from experiences at KU, that some people who live maybe 2 doors down send each other emails rather than talking to each other. And I don't have to tell you the result of tweets that some people send at night to other people. So evolution in technology and how we communicate really is an aspect of evolution that should not be neglected. I think that's probably a very nice way of putting it, what is happening.
Can't see this very well.
And last but not least, we really don't know completely what the evolution of technology will mean for our everyday existences. Eventually, are we going to communicate with each other, even though we are in the same room, by holding a device and communicating by the device rather than talking to each other? Everybody will have his or her own cloud. And just think what will be contained in that cloud.
Oh,
I don't know if that is true, and if it's a very good image. The Titanic is sinking and somebody is taking a selfie. Obviously that was not the case at the time, but it's not too far-fetched. Let's talk about evolution and population. Just imagine for a moment that you are living in a village of 100 people. The population as of the 1st of January 2017 is roughly 7.4 billion. I think it's 7,458,000,000 on the 1st of January. So we have crossed the 7 billion well, and in a minute I will tell you what is in store. But if you live in a village of 100 people in 2017, you will have 10 Europeans. You will have 5 North Americans. You will have 8 Latin Americans. You have 1 person coming from the islands in the Pacific. 16 will come from Africa. 60 out of the 100 will come from Asia. So some people in Europe have read headlines, the Chinese are coming. I must tell you, the Chinese are already here. In general, the women have still 2.5 children. 26 of the inhabitants are less than 15 years old. That is a statistic that you should pay attention. So let me turn...
Less than 15?
Less than 15 years old. Let me turn to what the village of 100 people will be at the end of this century. Obviously, I won't be here. Many of you won't be here, but in any event, at the end of this century, the changes will have come. Only 6 Europeans will be among the 100 people. 4 will come from North America. 6 will come now from Latin America. 1 still will come from Oceania. But the number of Africans, people from Africa, have become from 16 to 39. In other words, that's the real jump. And the Asians that used to be 60 are now reduced to 44. if you have been in Europe recently, every day you read about refugees. Obviously, if you have been in Germany, the discussion is every day about refugees. So let's look at what it means to deal with refugees. In Germany at the moment, they are looking at about 472,000 children who are in German schools who do not speak German. Just imagine if we had among our students a significant number of people who don't speak English. Well, we could have wonderful teachers, but that wouldn't mean anything. 470,000 children in Germany are in schools where they really don't understand what the teacher is saying. Mrs. Merkel, who is standing for re-election next year, has signed a decree that anyone, with some exceptions, who cannot speak German in 5 years, who has not learned German in a real way, in 5 years must leave Germany.
That's terrible.
Well, you think it's terrible, but obviously you can't hold a job if you don't speak the language. You can't read a newspaper if you don't speak the language. You can't participate in the daily life if you don't speak the language. My generation, I came in the fall of 1948 as part of the Marshall Plan. I came as a student. We were told from the very first day that if you don't learn English, you will never make it in the United States. Well, some of my students have suggested, why don't you learn English? But anyway, I think I've managed reasonably well. But to me, learning the language of the culture in which you live is an absolute requirement to be integrated into a community. If you can't speak to people, then you can't really live among them meaningfully and participate in the daily life. Therefore, I would argue, and I have given money to English first, even though it's not my mother tongue. Just think, in Lawrence, Kansas, if you call 911, 50